Today we're going to watch the first stars form. We saw in episode 12 that atoms had formed about 400,000 years after the Big Bang. What followed is called the Dark Age because there were no stars, the universe was still filled with the radiation left over from the Big Bang, which was getting weaker as the universe expanded, but there were no bright objects. The universe was filled with the gas of hydrogen and helium, which we saw forming in episode 12. So we move forward about 200 million years to 13.6 billion years ago. The gas was collapsing under its own gravity. In fact, it had started collapsing since the Big Bang. We saw in episode 2 that the universe is filled with a cosmic microwave background radiation, which is almost uniform but has small fluctuations. We think that these were created by quantum fluctuations before inflation, and then inflation expanded these tiny fluctuations into huge dense areas, slightly more dense than the rest of the universe, which are now as large as clusters of galaxies. It was these slightly dense areas that led to this slow gravitational collapse. So after 200 million years, these areas were dense enough for atoms to begin to fuse together, as we'll see. The atoms were moving closer together, they were falling faster and faster, and as they fell, so the gravitational attraction grew stronger, which led to a runaway effect. So eventually they were moving very quickly. As particles move quickly, we've seen before that they become hot. They were so hot that the electrons boiled off the atoms and left a free cloud of electrons around the outside, and particles, the nuclei of the atoms, in the centre. So these were protons and alpha particles, mostly protons. The protons were colliding faster and faster. This eventually led to the fusion of protons. So 4 protons fused together in exactly the same way as they did from 10 seconds to 20 minutes after the Big Bang. We described this in episode 11. Can you remember what was produced from this fusion? There were small particles consisting of 2 protons and 2 neutrons. A particle called an alpha particle. And what happened is that 2 of the protons changed into neutrons, and their electric charge of these 2 protons went shooting away, and the particles which carried that positive charge are called positrons. They are identical with electrons, except that electrons have a negative charge and these positrons have a positive charge. The electrons, which had been stripped off the original atoms, were still being held fairly close to this cloud of particles by the electric force. So there were protons and alpha particles in the centre, and then around the outside, electrons. So the positrons travelled out from the core and they met the electrons. Now, positrons and electrons are antimatter of each other. We discussed antimatter in episode 7. So they have exactly the same mass but opposite charge. The result is that they annihilated, and their energy was converted into radiation. So the first stars began to shine. Stars shine because of nuclear fusion, which is powered by the force of gravity. These early stars were about 100 times bigger than the star which we call the Sun, and this happened about 200 million years after the Big Bang. So thank you for watching, and you can find more information on my website historyoftheuniverse.com.